You know, it's been a while since we've done a Tales from the Crypt, so I thought today we could take a look at the episode The Secret. The Secret was directed by Michael Riva, a man who has worked on things like Ilsa, Harem Keeper of the Oil Sheiks, and production designer for Iron Man. Two very different things. The episode was also written by Doug Ronning, whose only other credit is the Season 3 episode Spoiled. The episode takes us to Gaines' orphanage, obviously named after Bill Gaines, creator of EC Comics. Theodore, a young orphan boy, sneaks downstairs for a little midnight snack, while Miss Hagstead and Miss Heather talk pretty negatively about a certain child. Well, one of them does, and I'll let you guess which.
We've got to do something about Theodore. He's well past the desirable age for placement.
Miss Hagstead seems to have it in for Theodore for some reason, and when Miss Heather, who actually seems to care about the boy, asks about his real parents, Miss Hagstead nearly has a complete meltdown over it. Well, Theodore gets caught snooping, and the old hag gives him hell for sneaking around and taking food. Miss Heather is forced to bring the young boy back to his room and lock the door, but she makes the excuse of, well, I don't make the rules, but she does give him his apples, so I guess she's not completely miserable like the old hag. The following morning, Theodore is missing, his window is open, and Miss Heather is worried sick. Crusty old Hagstead, on the other hand, barely even bats an eye.
Good morning, Theodore.
This poor kid was so hungry it looks like he was out all night eating dirt. Unfortunately, he gets sent to do some chores with another kid who has a bright future as a stand-up comedian.
What's the difference between boogers and broccoli? Kids don't eat broccoli.
I've got to write that one down. Miss Heather then comes to inform the boy that some special people are coming to see him tonight, and he needs to make a good first impression. Otherwise, he's going to the glue factory. That night, the Colberts arrive looking like they were sculpted by Tim Burton, and choose to adopt Theodore almost like they're picking off a restaurant menu. Whoa, spoilers! Theodore, however, doesn't exactly want to go, so Miss Hagstead is going to help convince him in the other room.
Listen to me, you pesky little Sputnik! If these people want you, you're going.
I'm starting to think she might not like him. Theodore wants to know what happened to his parents, but all Hagstead tells him is they died, and to stop asking questions about their weird, bizarre, mysterious, secret death. Theodore doesn't really have much to say in the matter, and the Colberts take him to his new home in the middle of the day for night. Theodore hit the jackpot though because the Colberts are loaded. His new room has everything a boy in the 1950s, 1990s would ever want. But like the orphanage, he's just locked in his room.
Why have you locked the door? Mr. Colbert?
Not only that, they also have bars on the windows, so unlike the orphanage where he could just climb out, here he can't even do that. But at least he gets all-you-can-eat dessert. Still though, all the hot fudge sundaes in the world won't make up for the fact that no one really seems to give a damn about this kid.
Oh, what a glorious night.
Glorious.
Night? I think you mean day for night. Theodore tries asking the Colberts why he has to be locked in his room while they're at work, and they claim they don't want him getting lost in the woods. But then what's the point of their butler Tobias? I'm sure Larry Drake, who was also the killer Santa Claus in a previous episode I looked at, could handle a little boy. But they are planning a little something for him.
Really? What?
Oh, it's a secret.
Shut up.
Does this kid eat anything besides dessert? I'm getting diabetes just watching him. It is odd the Colberts keep stuffing him full of sweets and don't let him out of his room, almost like they're fattening him up for something. Oh. Even with all these great toys and delicious food, he would still rather be back at the orphanage with his friends, and I'm thinking, Miss Heather?
But it's not my birthday.
Well, of course it isn't, dear. Then it wouldn't be a surprise.
So this was their big secret? A birthday cake when it isn't even his birthday? At least he has Tobias, who's taken a bit of a liking to the boy, so there's that, I guess. But as night approaches, Theodore can hear the Colberts outside his room saying some really weird shit, calling him their orphan delicacy.
I don't think I can wait much longer. When we get home, we'll tell him our secret.
Shut up.
Oh, so they have another secret. What is it, the dog's fake birthday now? The Colberts return home later that night, and Tobias comes rushing into Theodore's room, saying they need to get out. But before they can, they're stopped by Mrs. Colbert, and she finally lets Theodore in on her little secret.
Let the boy go.
But his blood is so sweet now.
Yeah, they were vampires. They've been fattening the boy up with cakes and candy to make his blood nice and sweet. But why did Tobias wait until they got home to try and get him out? They easily could have left while the Colberts were at work. Well, regardless, Tobias gets killed for insubordination, and little Theodore is now on the run. You know, just throwing a blue filter on everything doesn't automatically make it nighttime. The Colberts catch up to Theodore, but they may have bitten off a little more than they can chew.
I have a secret too, Mrs. Colbert.
Shut up!
Damn, these kids hit puberty real quick these days.
I'm a werewolf. And I have an appetite for vampire.
The Colberts might be vampires, but I don't think anyone told them they adopted a goddamn werewolf. And there's something just hilarious about this tiny werewolf running after a vampire. Later that night, there's a pounding at the orphanage front door, and well, wouldn't you know it, Theodore is back, and it looks like he'll be sticking around for the time being. The episode is based on the story of the same name, which can be found inside Haunt of Fear number 24. The cover art was created by Ghastly Graham Ingalls and features a woman down in a cellar or crypt as she's confronted by a spooky, amorphous blob monster. The story was written by Carl Wessler with art by George Evans. The Secret tells the tale of young Theodore, a 12-year-old boy who seems to be unwanted by all. Miss Graves and Miss Heather talk about him every single night while he's supposed to be asleep, about how much they need to get rid of him but can't because he's getting too old. Theodore thinks there must be something wrong with him. Why wouldn't anyone want him unless they were hiding a secret? Maybe his real parents are still out there, and maybe if he starts to behave, they'll come back? Theodore doesn't like to cause trouble, but he's bigger than the rest of the children. He tries to ask for more food because he needs more, and they just lock him in his room. Unable to deal with the tiny room, Theodore leaves most nights out of his window, and the two old women could seem to care less, often hoping that he doesn't even return. He always does though, and on this particular morning, Theodore is asked to come down to Miss Graves' office. There he's introduced to the Colberts, a husband and wife that want to adopt him. However, Theodore doesn't want to go. He wants his real parents, not some strangers. He starts to cause trouble, so Miss Heather takes him aside to give him a little talk. She loses it on him. She's tired of his nonsense, and he won't ruin this chance for her to finally get rid of him. He finally gives in and agrees to leave with the Colberts, but first he wants to know this secret about him. Miss Heather begins to panic because she can't tell him the truth, and well, she doesn't. Theodore kisses the old woman goodbye and goes with his new family. The Colberts seem like any average husband and wife, but their home, it feels kinda cold. There are no sounds of other children laughing and playing, it's just quiet. Mrs. Colbert fixes a nice dinner, and they make sure Theodore eats every last bite. They take Theodore to his new room, which he seems excited about at first, except once again he's locked inside, and now there are bars on the windows. The Colberts just tell him the reason the bars are there is a secret, and they'll tell him later. Theodore begins to cry because he thinks Miss Graves and Miss Heather told him his secret and he's being punished for it. Day after day, Theodore is stuck in his room and fed tons of food. Mrs. Colbert tells him he was run down when they first adopted him, and they're trying to bulk him back up, which is also why they don't want him running around because he'll lose all that weight that he's gained. A month after Theodore was brought to live with the Colberts, and he finally knows their secret. The two adoptive parents have had enough waiting, and tonight they're finally going to share what they've been hiding. They're vampires and have been fattening Theodore up for a nice tasty meal. Isn't that a nice secret, Theodore? Theodore, come out, Theodore. It's no use screaming, Theodore, there isn't a house for miles. Theodore lurches out from the darkness of his room, but he was wrong. His secret is much different than theirs. Edwin, look! Good lord! That's right, Theodore's a werewolf, and he rips and tears until it is done. The Secret is a fun little Tales from the Crypt episode. However, it feels more like an episode of Goosebumps than it does Tales from the Crypt. There isn't a whole lot that goes on, and what does happen is pretty tame. You spend close to half the episode just watching Theodore in his room eating ice cream and cake than anything else. Most Tales from the Crypt will have some vulgarity, or gore, or nudity, something, because it was on HBO. But here, if you just take out the brief shots of werewolf Theodore tearing away at the Colberts' necks, then you could easily show this to kids on a Saturday morning. All the actors do fine, but they don't have a lot to work with really. Georgianne Johnson does a good job of playing the hateful Miss Hagstead, and Grace Zabriskie and William Frankfather really camp it up as the Colberts, which definitely fits the tone of an EC comic. Mike Simran is alright for a child actor, but seeing him as this tiny werewolf is always hilarious. The twist doesn't exactly come out of nowhere, as it's somewhat hinted at when they show the full moon before Theodore is locked in his room. But if Miss Hagstead knew his secret, then did she also know the Colbert's secret? When she spoke to Theodore in the kitchen, she kind of acted like she did, so was she hoping the Colberts would kill him? She obviously didn't want Theodore around anymore, and this would definitely get rid of him. The constant use of day for night is also kind of jarring, although I'm wondering if this was something they had to do because they were shooting with children. I know legally, children have a set time they can film, so maybe in order to shoot the night scenes, they had to shoot during the day and then just slap a blue filter on everything and call it a night? The story follows the comic fairly faithfully, with a few minor changes. Miss Hagstead is Miss Graves in the comic, and Miss Heather is also an old woman, who doesn't seem to like Theodore very much. I guess they made the decision to change Miss Heather into a younger, more caring woman, so Theodore would have a real reason to want to stay, when in the comic both women treated him pretty badly, so outside of his friends, what reason would he have to stick around? The Colberts in the comic seemed more like a traditional, unassuming family, where the TV version they were wealthy and very weird, which would definitely set off some alarms. Also, comic Mrs. Colbert? The Secret is a pretty fun episode of Tales from the Crypt, with a cool twist. Most episodes usually have someone coming back from the dead to exact revenge, so it's nice to have something a little different. It does a pretty good job of capturing the spirit of the comic, and even though it's not as good as I remember it being, it still comes recommended. Well, that's all for today, boils and ghouls, but let me know down in the comments your thoughts on The Secret. And remember to come back here for some more Tales from the Crypt.
Till next we meet.